So I guess my job on this earth is policing people on the internet. Granted, I'm just getting started, and there's another guy who does that, but he only makes one video a year, so you're gonna have to settle for me. Or not, you can do whatever you want. So I've been preparing a long-format video on one of my oldest nemesis, Keith, from TheNiceCast.
Lisa, hold the book. Vincent, get the truck. And Keith, darn it, change your name, please.
But I've decided to forego that in favor of responding to one of his newer videos. It's possible, but the future of a long-format video on the entire internet entity of TheNiceCast is still uncertain. As soon as I saw the title of his new video, What Does the Boys Say About Zack Snyder, I knew I was in for some impressive mental gymnastics, since the show creator had made it clear that he doesn't like Snyder's films, and there's no way TheNiceCast could reconcile that The Boys, a beloved show he's been praising, has been making fun of his precious Zack Snyder. So I became curious to see what he was going to do to explain this one away.
Those of you who know me know that I am a huge Zack Snyder fan. And if you're not familiar with me, I'm not being sarcastic, because that's always a common question. Are you being sarcastic when you praise Zack Snyder? Are you trolling?
So he starts by admitting he's a huge Zack Snyder fan and telling us that a lot of people question whether he's trolling when he says this, which is a totally reasonable question. But sadly, take it from me, he's not. So let's tackle one of the first things he credits to Zack.
I think what Zack was doing with superhero films was nothing short of genius between Watchmen, Man of Steel, BVS.
How was anything in the Watchmen movie genius on Zack Snyder's part? What did he add to this movie that was genius? What came from that movie that was an original Zack Snyder idea? I'll give you a second to think. Nothing. Not a single thing. Stop attributing Alan Moore's work to Zack Snyder, you Keith.
That's not scary, and I'm embarrassed to say it. Boris, try that.
There's nothing profound or visionary in the movie that wasn't taken from the comic book. NiceCast and all the other Snyder bots will point out Watchmen as a revolutionary work of art, as they didn't know it was based on a comic book. But you literally have a copy of Watchmen behind you. Have you ever read it? Have you ever opened it? I'm assuming you bought it because you thought it was written by Zack Snyder, but when you got home you didn't see his name attached to it, so you stuck it on the shelf in the background of your video so you could pretend you know anything about it. And as for Man of Steel and BVS, well, I mean, clearly you're in the minority there.
Just Superman deserved better. And for that, I will say Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice would have been a better time if I were drunk.
Character as Batman is awesome in it. I'm gonna give Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice
like finger on the trigger. Chopper eat his liver. I came with the even with a body. Not the big spot. I walk around like that.
The culture of superhero films needs Zack Snyder now more than ever before, and what's really unfortunate is that he may never make a superhero film again.
Is it though? I mean, like I said, minority?
So when The Boys came out on Prime Video, a conversation, given how certain parts of that show are shot, and some of the visual inspiration, it kind of mirrored Zack Snyder's interpretation of superheroes.
Are you some kind of idiot? Are you intentionally doing this to irritate me? Do you not know that superheroes existed before Zack Snyder? Do you not know that The Boys is an adaptation of a comic book that came out years before Zack Snyder ruined DC movies? Look, time and time again, through little hints, you give away that you don't know what you're talking about. The Boys mirrors The Boys' interpretation of superheroes. Zack Snyder is trying to mirror The Boys' interpretation of superheroes. You versus the guy she told you not to worry about.
And I came across an interesting article that I want to share with you. That says, the headline reads, Zack Snyder inspired Amazon's The Boys, pretentious movies within the show. So Eric said this to Entertainment Weekly. In terms of in the show, every time they make a superhero thing, they're making a Zack Snyder movie. In the stuff that Vought makes, and Vought is the corporation within The Boys, we were inspired more by DC than Marvel. The Marvel stuff is actually reasonably grounded, but the DC stuff tends to get a little pretentious. And we wanted the Vought superhero movies to be a little full of themselves.
And And now he tries to find some way to believe that maybe he didn't actually mean what he clearly meant.
And this is a quote from Eric Kripke, who is the show's showrunner. And I also want to be clear that in 2019, anytime someone is quoted in a website article, not only is the context lost, but you really wonder, did that person really mean the way it came out? Or is this article presenting it and it sort of changing the essence of what the person said? Because everyone needs clicks, and clickbait is what drives traffic.
What is the possibly lost context of this? It's a pretty complete quote. I really don't see what you could add that would change this into Snyder praise. It's clearly taking a shot at his movies. But yeah, I guess you're desperate for any excuse to believe that he doesn't really dislike his movies, because deep down, you know that The Boys clearly has a better creative team behind it.
I'm going to go strictly off this quote, because if you think about it, it had Eric come out and said, yeah, like, I'm a huge fan of Zack.
What? What? How on earth did you get this from that? Did this break you? Did you suffer some kind of mental break? How is this in any way Eric saying he's a huge Zack Snyder fan? He's calling his movies pretentious and full of themselves. That's an insult. You're pretentious and full of yourself. Does that sound like a compliment, Keith? Does it?
Keith, you know? Oh, watch out for Keith.
And we definitely took what he was doing and we wanted that to play out on The Boys.
Ah! He literally says the exact opposite of that. The only time The Boys is inspired by Zack's movies is during quick throwaway gags that show off a bunch of bad, pretentious movies. Did we watch the same show? Please go back and watch The Boys, because their movies within the movies, they're bad. They're very bad. They're intentionally bad. It's like your obsession with Zack Snyder is causing you to have a distorted vision of reality where everything is bent to compliment and praise him. Then you go and do a complete 180 and admit that he's saying that The Boys is making fun of Zack Snyder.
I would have been happy about that, obviously, as a Zack Snyder purist. But this does sound like it's, The Boys is not necessarily paying homage to Zack, but mocking him.
Who are you? Are you okay? Is Zack Snyder holding you hostage? Next video you upload, just blink 3 times at the 1 minute 15 second mark and I will call the police and have them go to your house.
So this is where I would challenge Eric about this. Eric, what you were able to accomplish throughout season 1 with superheroes was utterly fascinating. I think The Boys saved superhero content for the foreseeable future, and I cannot wait for season 2. But this shade that's being thrown to Zack was not presenting superheroes or overpowered beings in a pretentious way.
Now here's an opportunity for me to do something I always love doing, and that's teaching people definitions of very simple words. This is the dictionary definition of pretentious: attempting to impress by affecting greater importance, talent, culture, etc. than is actually possessed. And that is the big difference between Zack Snyder and The Boys. The Boys has all the importance, talents, and culture that it claims to have. I wanted to drift away from talking about Zack Snyder because I don't want people to see this channel as pure Zack Snyder hate, because it's not, but I have to address this because I feel like it's an important argument to make. The reason the similar themes work better in The Boys is because The Boys gets to really show them off. The similar theme between the two is what happens to the morality of someone with godlike powers who lives with mortal people. How does this affect their worldview? How do they feel about humans? Is it possible for them to not be corrupted by their power? Is it really possible for them to care about us and to save us and vice versa, blah, 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 blah. With the character of Homelander, we get to see the answers to that. What's his worldview? Well, he says it multiple times. He's so powerful he can do whatever he wants. How does he feel about humans? He doesn't really care for them. Is it possible for them to not be corrupted by their power? Well, in the case of Homelander and the rest of the 7, no, not really. Homelander is a case of absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is it possible for us to count on them to save us? Well, the people on that plane would probably have to say no. Zack Snyder presents these questions, but he never really does anything daring with them. Superman believes that it's his job to protect people. He's devastated when he can. He's apparently incorruptible. He's completely flawless. At worst, he gets mopey because he can't save everybody, and because people can't accept him and don't trust him. Yet you parade this around like it's some profound and groundbreaking look at Superman, and we just aren't ready for some daring take on the character that completely flips our view on superheroes on its head. When in reality, the reason people don't like him is something much smaller. He's a completely hopeless character, and it's a stab in the heart of Superman.
And I don't feel like, and I do feel like the only thing that makes your show compelling, in my opinion, and why everyone, whether it's MCU fans or DCEU fans, why everyone is enamored with The Boys is because it really challenges us, which Zack Snyder was precisely trying to do with his DC films.
I'll just leave you with one quote from a famous film franchise to counter that last statement.
Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
But I'm not done yet.
I thought I was just going to upload this video here and be done with it, but then our good friend Keith uploaded another Zack Snyder video in relation to The Boys, and I just couldn't go on and not address it.
Which further begs the question, if you find The Boys amazing, how could you hate Zack Snyder or dislike what he was attempting to do with his take on superheroes?
Because The Boys is good and BVS is not. End of video. Just kidding, I've got to tolerate even more of this video, so you do too.
Because they are virtually exactly similar. The Boys may be a little bit more playful and satirical and may have more humor. But the heart, the core, the essence of both interpretations of superheroes are the same.
See, this is interesting because there was a video that was recently uploaded on a channel called The Critical Drinker that covers the tendency of people to overlook flaws in entertainment and simply deflect all criticism by pointing at the theme of the movie. It's what you're doing here. Sure, The Boys and BVS have similar themes, but if you believe that they're on similar levels of quality in any way, you're out of your mind. Within the first 2 episodes, you like Billy Butcher way more than Batman. Homelander's a more interesting character than Superman. He's probably one of the best characters on TV since Walter White. Madeline Stillwell is a superior villain to Lex Luthor. The conflict between the Boys and the Seven is better and much more believable than the conflict between Batman and Superman. The character moments are better, the humor is better, everything is better.
And to be honest, Eric Kripke, his comments when The Boys came out initially, it's hard to really determine what his intent was.
As I stated earlier, no, it's not hard to say. It's pretty clear. You just refuse to come to terms with it.
But how can you truly hate what Zack was doing and just completely shit on a film like Batman v Superman, which, to be honest, there is no film that exists in the superhero climate today or in the future that comes close to the replayability of BVS, to the depth of BVS, to the way that film is shot. Nothing.
Well, I mean, this all sounds like a bunch of opinion, an opinion that most people would disagree with, and not because they have any bias, because people just have opinions, and a lot of times the majority of the population holds a similar opinion, just the way it is. What you've introduced here is an excuse to claim that any director whose movies get poor reviews while another movie with similar themes gets good reviews is the subject of a bias. Let me give you an example where I use your bias formula and apply 2 similar films that are completely different levels of quality. Ever since the dawn of man, or woman, because it's 2019, there have been certain questions that have plagued us all. Is there a God? Are we alone in the universe? And is there a Kevin Connolly bias in the media? I tried to explore this conversation in a video I see on YouTube that got into whether or not there was a Goodfellas bias or a Kevin Connolly bias. So is there an ongoing worldwide conspiracy where professional critics, professional tweeters with really elaborate bios, even though no one has any idea what they do or what type of content they make, and everyone else are all these people rating Scorsese movies higher than the competition? The passion for this conversation was reinvigorated upon the release of The Godfather in theaters, because one of the most impressive things about The Godfather is not how it challenges our view of mobsters or those in the mob. It's not the real-world implication of if mobsters really existed in our world. The most impressive thing about The Godfather is how it brought solidarity to 2 fandoms where it seemed impossible. Both fans of Kevin Connolly movies or Martin Scorsese movies agree. The Godfather is amazing. Which further begs the question, if you find The Godfather amazing, how can you hate Kevin Connolly or dislike what he was attempting to do with his take on mobsters, because they are virtually exactly similar. The Godfather may be a little more playful and satirical and may have more humor, but the heart of the message, the core of the message, both interpretations of mobsters are the same. And to be honest, Francis Ford Coppola, his comments when The Godfather came out initially, it's kinda hard to tell what his intent was. Was he bigging up Kevin Connolly? Was he hating on Kevin Connolly? Was he poking fun at Gotti, which is a little more serious than Godfather? Or was he in a roundabout way poking fun at how lighthearted Goodfellas is? I think it's hard to decide because none of the articles in 2019 can seemingly present what someone was actually intended to say with a quote. It's truly befuddling. Y'all are supposed to have journalism degrees, but you can't accurately relay what a person you asked a question actually wanted to say? It's disgusting. But I ask you again, how can you praise Godfather? And I know John Gotti Sr., John Gotti Jr., Neil Delacroix, Victoria Gotti, these are people that existed well before Kevin Connolly. I know that there's a rich history of these iconic names and people, but how can you truly hate what Kevin was doing and just completely shit on a film like Gotti, which to be honest, there is no film that exists in the mobster movie climate today or in the future that comes close to the replayability of Gotti, to the depth of Gotti, to the way that film is shot. Nothing. And I would even argue that the humor that Gotti has is more genuine and fun than anything else out. When Gotti is in the prison, he says, "What, the Daily News?" And the music is too loud? That's funny. That's genuine humor. That tells me that if these people were alive today, that this is exactly how I would expect him to talk to his wife. And just like The Godfather, which if mobsters were real today, which I've seen countless talks about this in tweets, Instagram captions, story posts. If Godfather was real, this is how mobsters would be. They would be kind of shitty individuals. How can you acknowledge this, but then not acknowledge what the other guy was doing? And I will continue to say that what happened with Kevin Connolly and the Vertical Entertainment Group was a tragedy, because whether or not you support his films or not, whether you support him as a creator or not, none of that. What matters is the man had a plan, a vision that he was creatively not able to carry out. So when The Godfather gets unanimous praise from both fandoms, I'll ask you again, is there a Kevin Connolly bias that you don't want to talk about? No, there's no Zack Snyder bias. People realize that his films fell short of their ambitions, but you choose to look past his shortcomings because you like the themes. And this is what I'm going to leave you with. You don't care about the pacing of the film. You don't care about the quality of the writing. You don't care about the storytelling. You don't care about how well this movie carries out its themes. You just care that they're in there. And you certainly don't care about the movie's treatment of century-old characters.
Good day, sir!